we all know language learning can be a kind of painful and difficult process. So I've basically just put together, I think, 5 uncomfortable truths about language learning that you learn. And if you are still learning a foreign language and you haven't done this before, this video will be kind of useful for you, just understanding a little bit of how it works. So straight into it. The first thing I will say is it is doable if you do it. And this is I put it number 1 for a reason, because even if people think they understand it, a lot of the time they don't, which is why I'm going to explain it. So to learn a language, you obviously need to invest time and effort, but I think what a lot of people do is they kind of disconnect the result that they want, which is learning the language, from themselves, and they don't actually come to terms with the fact that to learn a language, they actually need to put in effort and they need to do the things that are required to learn a language. So when it comes to learning a language, you're basically taking new information you've never seen before and not just learning it, but putting it into your long-term memory so that you can actually understand the language and produce the language whenever you need to, basically on demand. And a lot of people don't understand this, and so they do stuff here and there in the language. They don't target particular topics within the language, and then they find that they don't really make any progress and they get really frustrated. And of course the reason for this is quite simple, and it's because they haven't done the tasks required to actually learn the language. That's the only reason why you could not learn a language. Unless you learn a language and get like brain damage, this is the only reason. It's doable if you do it. So if you want to learn a language, you need to come to terms with the fact that you do need to do the tasks involved, and you do need to adopt a growth mindset, which basically means understanding that you can learn anything that you invest time and effort into. You're not kind of locked out of any kind of knowledge or skills. You can obtain it, you just need to put in the work. And I think a lot of people these days do have very fixed mindsets, and it's not good when it comes to making progress. So yeah, that is something you kind of do need to destroy. And yeah, once you do, you will find you actually do make more progress, and that you can in fact learn a language even though it's quite difficult. And I think understanding this, I need to stop saying "and I think," but understanding this is quite uncomfortable, because you basically realize that you are in full control of your progress, and it's not luck, it's not genetics or anything, so you can't really blame anyone apart from yourself. And if you want to learn a language faster, you effectively need to put in more effort, which can be uncomfortable if you're not particularly disciplined, or you're short for time, or you're bad at organizing, etc. But yeah, that is kind of the uncomfortable truth of it. And one other thing I'll mention while we're on this slide is to basically put processes over results. So if you haven't seen some of my previous videos, results are basically the result you're after, or the goal you're looking for. So in this instance, it's to learn a language, but it could be anything. It could be, fitness. It could a fitness goal. It could be, whatever. And the process is effectively what you need to do to achieve that goal. And a lot of people, when they are learning a language or any particularly difficult goal, they focus on the result extremely hard. They actually sometimes start to vicariously live through other people by consuming content. You've probably seen this on social media. Everything is just people with the absolute best stuff. And that's an example of other people kind of consuming that content and basically giving it a reason to exist, because they would rather watch people with the result they want than actually achieve it themselves, is really bad. But if you can actually shift your focus from the result you're after to the process required to get it, you will find you actually make way more progress. So in the context of language learning, instead of obsessing over being able to speak a language and, feeling frustrated that you can't, if you just shift your focus to, okay, what do I actually need to do to achieve this goal? Okay, I need to consume content in the language. Okay, I need to write down a list of problems or a list of things I want to learn and tick them off over time. I need to make a list of words I want to learn, translate them, put them into flashcards, etc. You'll find, okay, this is actually quite easy. I just need to make a logical list of things I need to do to become better in the language, and I just need to tick them off over time. And that's all there is to it. So yeah, this is number 1. I put it number 1 for a reason. It is doable if you do it. And a lot of people, of course, don't do it. So number 2, progress equals consistency. This is something else people don't do, and I'm actually going to give a more kind of intellectual, because if you're watching this channel, you probably are a fairly smart person if you're interested in this kind of stuff. I'm basically going to give a more intellectual explanation than normal as to why consistency is so important for making progress, particularly in language learning. So to become proficient in a language, or to make progress in a language, you do really need to stay consistent over time. And that is because of your long-term memory. So when we learn a language, unfortunately I haven't drawn a diagram for you today, but basically when we learn a language, we're encountering new information that we don't understand. We're understanding it and learning it, so you understand what a word means or a grammatical concept in a foreign language. And when you understand it, it basically goes into your short-term memory. If I asked you immediately, you'd be able to explain it to me. And then over time, you will gradually forget it because you're not using it. So what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to take new information, understand it, and then lock it into our long-term memory so that we can recognize that, concept, bit, a word or a grammar concept, and actually produce the language. So if we need to speak, for example, we're able to pull that information from our long-term memory. And what a lot of people do is they don't actually get the new information into their long-term memory, which is why they're not proficient in the language. So the best way to put new information into your long-term memory, which is after all what we're trying to do, is through consistency. There's basically 3 ways that you can take new information and put it into your long-term memory, but the most reliable and most implementable with language learning is repetition or consistency. So continuously going over the same topic, using words that you learn by consuming content, etc., you will find actually gets these things better locked into your long-term memory. I'll give you an example right now, actually. If you're learning a foreign language currently, and you're, haven't been doing it for particularly long, when you try listening to content, often it's a big jumble, isn't it? Like everything kind of mixes together. You don't really know what they're talking about. However, occasionally you'll hear words like the, I, as in capital I, and etc. And those words will kind of, you know what I'm saying, right? Like when you're listening to something in a foreign language, those kind of basic words will jump out at you. And the reason they kind of jump out from all of the garble that you don't understand is because even though you're not proficient in that language, those few words have made their way into your long-term memory. So basically probably a week or 2 after you started learning a foreign language, the word for I, like capital I, in Russian it's ya, in Italian it's io, I could say it in 10 other languages, but that basically gets locked into your long-term memory very quickly because of how common it is in the language. The same goes for the word the. If the language you're learning has the word the, those kind of words will get very quickly locked into your long-term memory simply because you're exposed to them so much, and that's why they jump out at you when you're listening to something in a foreign language. So our goal is to basically get to that level with all words so that when you're listening to something in a foreign language, even if you're not paying a lot of attention, all of the words will basically make sense. And obviously that's a long-term goal because it's difficult to achieve, but that is basically what we're looking for. So the way to become more consistent in the language you're learning is to effectively get more organized. You need to kind of you need to set yourself. People get angry when I try and say something you should do because everyone is different. Ideally, you would set yourself one task in the language you're learning to do every single day, no matter what. So it could be flashcards, it could be reading, it could be listening to something, it could be watching something with subtitles, etc. But just doing one task every single day is a really great way to hold yourself accountable because you'll never be taking massive breaks if you're doing something every single day. And then from there, you can set yourself more tasks. So I've already made videos on this channel about high ROI, which means high return on investment tasks you can do in a foreign language you might be learning. If you want to check that out, just have a look at my channel page. You'll be able to find it in my videos. But yeah, most learners don't do this, and that is why they're inconsistent, which is why they don't make progress, and it's really frustrating. Number 3, motivation is fickle. And if you don't know what the word fickle means, it basically means drink of water. It basically means it comes and goes. So even if you really, really want to learn a language, like you might have a deeply personal reason, maybe it's for a partner, maybe it's for work, maybe you just live in that country and you don't speak the language yet for whatever reason, you still won't always feel like doing it. And that's obvious, right? Like we don't always feel like doing anything. But the thing about that is if you only do stuff when you feel like doing it, you're going to become inconsistent like we talked about on the previous slide, and you're not going to make strong progress. So I want to introduce you to kind of the concept of motivation, and everyone on the internet explains it terribly. So I'm going to explain it in a way that is actually useful. When it comes to motivation, there's basically 2 types. You've got short-term motivation and long-term motivation. Short-term motivation is basically what you feel like doing in the moment. So you might feel like language learning right now, or you might not. It doesn't matter what your long-term goal is. It's simply what you feel like doing right now. And then you have long-term motivation, which is it's not what you feel like doing right now. It's your goals and desires and things you want to achieve long-term. Now, if your short-term motivation and your long-term motivation match, for example, so you might want to learn a language and you feel like doing it right now, great. You can practice learning a language and you'll become better. The problem is that they don't always match. So if your long-term goal is you want to learn a language, that's unlikely to change unless, it could change, but that's probably a goal you'll keep for a while. and you don't feel like doing it at any given moment, that kind of divergence between your short-term motivation and long-term motivation creates a problem, because you can either do the work without motivation, and it's kind of difficult, and still kind of work towards the long-term goal, or you can choose to not do anything and sacrifice a bit of progress on the long-term goal simply because you don't feel like language learning. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They basically assume that because they don't feel like doing something right now, they shouldn't do it, and it's toxic, it's bad to do work when you don't feel like it, etc. And this basically always goes the same way, which is they start becoming inconsistent, they become sloppy, they give up, and they don't make any progress, and they ultimately feel unfulfilled because they have basically killed their long-term goal, even though they still want to achieve it. So what you need to understand is that motivation is extremely fickle. Short-term motivation is extremely fickle is what I should say. And you do need to learn to build some discipline. So even if you don't want to learn a language at any given moment, which is correct, you need to understand that whatever discomfort you're going through in the moment will vanish as soon as the moment vanishes. What won't vanish is the fact that you do want to learn a language, and you're going to look back in time and regret the fact that you didn't actually do work when you know you should have. Because imagine you do the work even when you don't really feel like it, for example. You're going to look back in a year being proficient in the language and go, I didn't feel like doing it, but I did it anyway, and now I'm extremely grateful to my past self for putting in that effort and basically improving my state, my current state. All of the language learning effort you're putting in isn't for your present self, it's for your future self. And it's really good to get into a habit of actually doing things for your future self to improve your future self. And it's really good for your gratitude to look back and be grateful at your past self for all the things that he or she did for you. So understand that you're not always going to have that kind of symmetry between short-term motivation and long-term motivation. And occasionally you will need to do things you don't particularly feel like doing, but it does pay off. And if you can be disciplined, you are actually doing what you feel like, except what you feel like is you're obeying your long-term motivation. And once you understand that, it's a bit of an uncomfortable truth, but you will be better off for it. Number 4, you're going to make mistakes. This one is obvious, but I'm going to kind of go a little bit more in depth. So with a process as complicated as learning a language, you're constantly going to make mistakes. You're not going to understand things that other people seem to understand easily. You're going to, learn a translation of a word that isn't even the correct translation, and so you kind of stuff yourself up. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be painful. You're going to make so many mistakes. You're going to hate it sometimes. But the problem with that is that a lot of people have a really, really strong avoidance of anything that's kind of painful or difficult. And this basically leads them down a rabbit hole of not being successful in anything. So when it comes to learning a language, you need to understand that it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. And even if things are difficult, you can and will make progress over time if you do put in the hard yards, put in the effort, and you stay consistent. It doesn't matter how difficult something is to learn. We've already talked about this when we talked about growth mindset. You can make progress in it if you're willing to put in the time and effort. So yeah, make sure you are targeting problems that are difficult. Make a list of all the difficult things you're having in the language. Study it relentlessly. And if you want, you can comment down below and I'll try and give you a hand with any problems you have, or you can jump in our Discord. I've got a link in the description for that as well. But just remember, literally anything is possible if you are willing to put in effort to improve. And yeah, it's exactly the same with language learning. I've done it. I'm not an expert Italian, but I can speak it fairly well, even if I'm a little bit rusty to begin with. And yeah, you will make progress in any language you try to, no matter how difficult it is. So, number 5, you're going to become a new person. And I don't know if this is particularly uncomfortable, but I just wanted to put it in because once you actually learn a language, it completely changes your mindset and the way you see things, because you're no longer the person that can't set difficult tasks and pull them off. You almost feel superhuman because you've set yourself such a difficult goal that basically everyone quits. And you have done it. You've set yourself the goal of learning a language and you've pulled it off. You've done everything you said you were going to do. And this is really, really, I've written revolutionary. It honestly is revolutionary for your confidence and your skills, because you believe in yourself. You understand that you are someone who can do difficult things, and you know that any goal is doable, and that's a really powerful thing. And I wouldn't want anyone watching this video to miss out on it. So yeah, if you are still here at the end of the video, guys, you're obviously a real one, and I highly recommend you subscribe to keep seeing content like this, and check out my description. I've got a link to my course, The Language Learning Accelerator for beginners, and you're welcome to jump in our Discord as well. It's completely free. But yeah, thank you for watching and have a good one.